It's time to relearn how to walk, and verb tenses have made, are making, and will make all the difference in your life. That's what's coming up on episode 9 of Cultivate. So welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Here we are doing this series called Cultivate, which really is just an opportunity for us to get a first look at the scripture we're going to be studying and reading together as a church throughout this week. You know, it's a chance for us to kind of prepare the soil, to prepare the soil in our hearts and in our lives for the truth of God to find somewhere to put roots down and to bear fruit. So we find ourselves here in the middle of chapter 4 of the book of Ephesians. In the course of this study, we've been moving through Ephesians, and here we are in chapter 4. I'm going to read this scripture for you, and as you know, you'll have it up on the screen so you can follow along. Here it is, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 through 24. Paul writes this. He says, "Therefore, I say this and testify in the Lord, you should no longer walk as the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their thoughts. They are darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, and because of the hardness of their hearts. They became callous and gave themselves over to promiscuity for the practice of every kind of impurity, with a desire for more and more. But that is not how you learned about the Messiah, assuming you heard about him and were taught by him, because the truth is in Jesus. You took off your former way of life, the old self that is corrupted by deceitful desires. You are being renewed in the spirit of your minds. You put on the new self, the one created according to God's likeness in righteousness and purity of the truth." So, I remember a few years ago, I was doing a message at Daybreak, and I used this video as an illustration. It's a crazy video, and I don't really know the story. I wish I did know the story. It's a video of this bus that makes a U-turn on a highway. And actually, I'm going to bring it up here so you can see it. It's not very high quality, but you can at least kind of see what's happening. So you have this bus in the middle of this busy, 4-lane highway, and it just decides, I'm going to just make a U-turn here. And there's this other car that's doing the same thing. And I don't know the story, but look at what happens, Here it is. You can watch it again. It's just decides, I'm done going this way. I'm going to make a U-turn here, and I'm going to start going the other direction. All the cars are just backed up, and then everyone's trying to work around him. And as I'm watching this, several things occur to me. There's a couple thoughts that just occur to me watching that video. The first one is everyone around him. Can you imagine driving up and seeing that happen? Everyone around him is thinking, what is this person doing? What are they thinking? What is the matter with this person? Hopefully that's maybe the kind way of putting what folks were thinking. But just everyone around him, their lives are disrupted by the decision he's making, right? The driver's decision there, like to turn around, to go against traffic, completely disrupting the lives of everyone around him. He ends up going the opposite direction of everyone else. Now, in a pretty striking way, this is what Paul is telling us here in Ephesians, isn't it? He's saying, once you begin to follow Christ, you can't keep walking in the same direction you were going before. You can't keep going the same way you were going before. It's got to look different. It's got to be different. It's got to be different than the flow, than the pattern that you were practicing before. You can no longer walk the way the unbelievers walked. As we look at this text this week, I just want to present this challenge to me and to you as well. Let's look for ways this week, gentle and compassionate ways, to go against the flow. Ways to actually intentionally disrupt the traffic of what is a hectic and oftentimes anonymous, uncaring life. Isn't that the flow of life around us? It's just moving so fast and moving in so many ways, uncaring and kind of dehumanizing people. Let's look for ways to intentionally disrupt that traffic. Make eye contact with somebody and acknowledge their value, maybe with a smile or a kind word. Just do that. Send a text message to somebody out of the blue and just tell them you're thinking about them and you care about them. Spend 5 minutes. This will be a challenge. Spend 5 minutes just thanking God for who he is. Thanking God for the creation he's made. Just spend time just doing that. Ways to disrupt the flow of traffic in your life, the flow, the pattern of life. It's a process. It's not easy. But that's what we do when we follow Jesus. The good news, I should say, is that it is a process. The verb tense Paul uses here is so important in that. In verse 23, and I know you're excited to talk about verb tenses, I'm excited to talk about it as well. The word Paul uses in verse 23 when he says, you and I are being renewed. The tense there is the present middle infinitive, which means it's an ongoing process. It's continuous. It's happening as we are speaking. God is ever patient in renewing us as we go. So it's not just you need to do it and you're done, but God is working this process out in you. So it's okay if you've been swept up in the traffic, if you've been walking as Paul would put it, the Gentiles, the unbelievers, if you've been walking as people who don't know Jesus, if you've been walking that way. It's okay if you've been stuck in the futile thinking, as Paul puts it. It's okay because God is offering to renew you and I now. To begin and to continue that work in you now, today. We're all in the process of being renewed. So let's show some mercy to yourself. Take a breath and begin that process of turning against the flow with compassion and with mercy. And as Paul said last week, with love. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next week.